She was already inside the threshold when she whispered it. A sliver of a voice slicing through the downpour hissing on the street, her hair pasted to her cheeks, rain glittering on her lashes like 100 tiny arrangements of tears. "I'm not clean." And Jace could smell the bleach he'd left uncapped on the kitchen counter behind him, snapping against the copper bloom of blood that rode in with her. A scent he'd spent 3 years learning how to outpace but never outrun. He was a trauma cleaner. The guy with the van people called when bad things needed to look like they had never happened. And here was a bad thing that didn't want to be invisible. Here was a woman with a dishcloth clamped to her forearm and a look in her eyes like she'd swallowed a storm and it still had thunder left. And before he could speak, she stepped further into the narrow hall and the door swung on its hinges and gave the rain a final sibilant hiss like the world telling them, "Hush, you can't be here," he said reflexively, because reflexes were the only things left to him most nights, muscle memory and the steady rituals of solvent and swab. "If you're hurt, I can call—" "No," she cut in, clutching the cloth tighter, water dripping from the hem of her coat making dark galaxies on the floorboards. "No police, no ambulances, no names. You clean what's left behind, don't you? I need you to clean what I bring." There were footsteps in her voice, pursuit somewhere behind the rain, and Jace's mind sharpened into the old focus that used to come before a scene when he'd pull into a driveway and breathe, and remind himself that dignity was the last gift that could be given. "You're bleeding," he said. "Come to the kitchen." And he moved, not thinking about whether this was the kind of thing a person survived or invited. Only that she was human, and in front of him, and the cloth on her skin had gone from white to a marbled pink with too much effort. They turned the corner, the house a narrow shotgun with the kitchen and the living room sharing breath, and he flicked on the under-cabinet light, the only one he ever left on anymore because bright things made the world feel honest, and honesty had been scarce since Mira, and he didn't think her name. He refused the way it tried to crowd the edge of his mind, the way it felt when a memory swelled like a bruise if you pressed it. "Sit," he said, pointing at the stool by the butcher block island, pulling a drawer open with his foot to get gauze, tape, shears, the antiseptic bottle with its label rubbed pale by the habit of his thumb. The woman shook her head like the stool was too much stillness, but she obeyed, her jaw tight, her gaze skittering like a frightened bird to the back door where the rain hammered the glass, and Jay set the kit on the counter and reached for the cloth, the dishcloth that didn't belong to his kitchen, and when he touched it he felt the ordinary texture of woven cotton, damp but not sodden, and the way it adhered to her skin felt wrong, too deliberate, like glue on paper, and he curled his fingers under the edge and met her eyes for permission, and she nodded, a tiny surrender. "You don't understand," she said, barely moving her lips. "I don't mean dirt, I mean—" And then the cloth dropped, sloughing free in a slow unfurl that pulled a sound out of her throat, and his heart stopped. The world stopped. The rain cut itself mid-syllable. The light seemed to take a breath and hold it, because beneath that cloth the skin of her forearm was not only cut, it was written upon, an orbit of dark micro-lacerations circling the wound in a pattern he recognized with the kind of knowing that doesn't feel learned so much as remembered. A ring of tiny symbols like crop circle ciphers burned into flesh, and at the exact center of the ring, where blood tried to bead and was repelled by something fluorescent embedded under the epidermis, was a mark he knew the way you know your own name. The knotwork M that had been etched on a paper found under his sister's mattress the day she disappeared. His heart stopped, the way hearts do when a hand of ice clutches them, and then it shuddered back into rhythm so hard he had to grip the counter. "Where did you get that?" he said, and his voice was not his voice but something older, raw. "Who are you?" And she gave a small breath that sounded like confession scraping. "Bone. They call me Ivy when they need me to be a thing. I am what they clean with, and I am done being a solvent. I used to be a person," she said. And this was said simply, as if she were telling him the time. "I worked the front at a laundromat that doesn't wash clothes, Mr. Forrester. Yes, I know your name because we watch the ones who wipe away our shadows. We count those who take our residue and make it whisper. You cleaned an apartment on Shinbone Street last year, remember? After a missing person report turned into a probable death file because the rent went unpaid for 3 months, and the neighbors stopped asking questions. You cleaned that room, and you found nothing because they left nothing for a man like you to find. They left everything in us. We were the hard drives. They wrote their books under our skin so we couldn't photocopy them. The kitchen was suddenly cold, or maybe it was only his blood abandoning the parts of him that didn't matter, rushing inward. He stared at the circle of marks, the promise of pattern there, and he said, almost to the room, "Mira." And Ivy flinched like a string plucked under her skin. "Then she was yours," she said, and closed her eyes as if bracing for the impact of grief that wasn't hers but would bruise her anyway. She wasn't like me. They thought she could be, but she wasn't. She ran. I didn't see her end, only the middle. They called it a family, the way a wolf calls a wound a mouth. They call themselves the laundry, because they wash money and conscience in the same sink. And Mr. Calder likes jokes, likes the front to match the function. The symbol is his. That M that looks like it means you but really means him. They marked us with it so we'd carry his name to our graves. Jay swallowed the retch that rose like a wave when he saw the symbol glow under the antiseptic light. The little ring of fluorescence embedded under Ivy's skin caught the glow of his UV pen light when he flicked it on and shone it at her arm. The ring bloomed in ghostly blue, and as the blood cleared under the wash of his gauze, the microlacerations formed lines. The lines formed letters. The letters formed strings of numbers that weren't numbers at all. Accounting disguised as scripture, ledger disguised as wound. And there, nested in the ring, a series like a date, like a coordinate, like the kind of thing you dream because your mind wants to be found. "You came to me because you think I can clean you," he said. A dry rasp, and she smiled, a terrible little smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I came to you because you are the only cleaner who takes pictures before he scrubs. You keep things you don't tell anyone you keep, Mr. Forrester. You have the habit of archivists and the grief of a brother, and I need both. I'm not clean because this inside me isn't just ink. It's tracking. It's proof. It's a beacon and diffuse. And you're bleeding," he said again, because if he didn't come to ground somewhere, he'd float out of himself, and she nodded. "I pulled a chip they put in, but I didn't get it all. I was running when the driver clipped the corner on Harlow and 5th, and I threw myself into the market crowd. I wrapped it up with what I grabbed from a stall. I don't know whose cloth this is," she said, looking at the damp square like it was something that had betrayed her. And he looked down too, and saw it was green and white, the kind you could buy in a pack of 5. Except someone had stitched initials in the corner with gray thread. M.N. Mira North, his sister's full name, stitched in the habit their grandmother had taught her. The small nicks in the serif exactly hers because she'd learned on napkins and bled the thread at the curves. He felt the weight in his chest become a living thing that wanted to hammer its way out. "He kept her things," Ivy said quietly, sensing the seismic minute tilt in him. "He kept trophies because boys like him who burn lives for warmth always keep something to remind themselves they are gods in rooms with locks. The laundromat is on Carroll, but you know that. And the back office is where the machines never run, where everything smells like cold iron and coffee. He calls the clients shirts and the girls rags when he's funny, and I am so tired of being a punchline." And Jace heard how flat her words were at the end, tired like a line held taut too long, and he hated the part of him that had been sleeping while other people woke up screaming 2 blocks away. In a little storefront with a neon sock in the window that flickered whenever the city coughed, he reached for the antiseptic and the gauze and carefully cleaned the wound. Not to erase, not to obliterate, but to reveal. Because the only way out of a stained world is sometimes to show the stain to the light, until the darkness inside, it blinks. And she watched him as if he were inventing a new shape of mercy. "This will hurt," he said, because it did always, and she laughed without joy. Everything hurts, and he thought, then the pain doesn't get to be the thing that stops us. He taped the gauze over but loose, so the UV could get in when needed, and put her coat in the sink and patted it dry enough it wouldn't drip like a breadcrumb trail. "They'll come," she said, and he didn't ask who they were because no pronoun could hold their shapes. He went to the cabinet and brought down the metal case he kept the way other men keep whiskey, and clicked it open to show his camera.